Welcome back to the Sportsfan Radio panel after a fortnight on the Pine, and plenty to talk about in sport. And Judge, I'm going to bring you in off the long run. Eddie Betts and the Crows camp has reared its ugly head yet again.
It has, Professor. It's a lot. It raised a lot of issues. I'm really interested in what the panel think about this, but of course we heard about it during the week and what had happened in the 2018 camp. It just sounds worse than revolting. The problem is getting to the bottom of it, Professor. I see that Carolyn Wilson's written a report about it, and as usual with Carolyn Wilson, I sort of take it with a grain of salt. And it turns out, in fact, as much as she sounds like she's surprised about the whole thing, it turns out The Age actually wrote the story on this in 2020 and got sued over it, and were forced to make an apology. So you have to sort of wonder where The Age is on all of this. You have to realise that Eddie's selling a book, so it's difficult to get to the bottom of it. But what we do know is that the players told things to a psychologist or psychologists, and as part of their way of conducting business, they then repeat it at the camp, and then the players were subject to all sorts of taunts and would seem racial insults against Eddie Betts. So the Aboriginal Indigenous situation just continues to roll on, Professor, and the AFL has come up with the usual non-apologies, which they always give, and it's never genuine, never sincere. And I just wonder whether this leaves us with the Indigenous situation, but no better than it's been, I suggest, in the last 20, 30 years, probably ever since Nicky Widmar made his great stance at Victoria Park that day. Terrible situation.
Good afternoon, gents.
G'day, Paul.
Should this be the end of the AFL Players Association as it is?
Oh, yeah. That's one of the things it raises, Coutta, yeah.
We've talked about the AFL Players Association previously and the money that they get. Now, Paul Marsh, another one of these administrators that seems to stay within the industry, they've opened again. They're going to open an investigation again because they only just found this out in his book.
Well, I've got to tell you keep going.
No, you're right. No.
What I heard, it wasn't Indigenous as much. What he confided in the counsellors who said we won't use it against you, Mr. Betts, is that his father wasn't around much. He was in and out of jail. And in the initiation or the hazing, whatever you call it, ritual, they were screaming at him, "You'll be a terrible father," which is his biggest paranoia. So I think it's insanely out of order, putting to one side the Indigenous issues, to be screaming that in someone's face. Josh Jenkins from a broken family, they used that against him, raised by his grandparents. I don't know the relevance of that to team bonding. Just disgusting, really disgusting.
The other thing is they lost one game. They lost the grand final to the Tigers, and they've then gone and done this. Now, in what right mind, and Judge, if you look at the Collective Mind website, you'll note that the directors still refer to the success that they had with the Adelaide Crows. Now, I would have thought, and I'm not a smart man, I would have thought that would have been one of the first things you remove. But no, they've still got it on there. So I just, so many questions are asked, and like, in what, and Paul, you identified it. Where does, like, how does they even think this is good? Good practice. Where's the governance? And a final point on this, Judge, how the hell is Mark Rasciuto still involved at the footy club as football director? Now, if there's ever been anyone more conflicted, he might be it, but he runs the town, as we know.
Yep.
Well, the Crows were very damning about it, but I did notice that almost to make a lighter spin on it, they came out and referred to a camp 20, 30 years ago when Nigel Smart walked over burning coals and had some hot feet. But that's very different to these psychological injuries. He played 2 days later. It was almost they were trying to suggest these camps have been around for a long time. When you start sledging someone about their dad not being around much, that is worse than hot coals in my book, anyone's book. Oh, Eddie's book, excuse the pun. After what you said, Coutta, just drawing on Mark Rasciuto's comment
when he was asked about it last week, he said, "We love Eddie and hope he is getting over that. That was 4 years ago. Certainly the club has moved on." Well, that misses the entire point of the discussion, doesn't it?
Mark doesn't get it. Mark doesn't get it. He will be on Fox Footy. I assume he'll be on Fox Footy today doing his boundary riding role or whatever. He doesn't get it, doesn't understand it. And the fact that he's still at the footy club would indicate that he doesn't get it.
Yeah.
The AFL says that they investigated fully. The WorkCover SA investigated fully. And as a result of that, they've now appointed Indigenous liaison officers and a structured regime of communications for all of the Indigenous cohort, whatever that means. That is just wallpapering over BS. None of that happened as a result of the Eddie Betts, the camp, because according to them, nothing happened. It was investigated, they say, thoroughly, and WorkCover SA investigated thoroughly. Well, then why should Gil McLachlan be apologising for anything? The reality is they didn't investigate it. They don't talk to the Indigenous people. And therefore, because of his mealy-mouthed apology, this problem will just continue, and we know it will.
Well, but as I understand it, it's not just a problem with Indigenous players. There were a number of players who had a problem with what was done at the camp, and some of them weren't Indigenous players. And just on the apologies again, the CEO at Adelaide, Tim Silvers, he'd like to say he's sorry to Eddie and anyone else who had a negative experience. Well, hang on.
Yeah.
What is that? Anyone else?
It's not like Survey Monkey or when I check out here at the work retreat, filling out a few boxes. I don't know Josh Jenkins' heritage, but I'm pretty sure it's not Indigenous. So I don't know how him being sledged about not being raised by his parents who weren't around and he's raised by his grandparents, how that's got to be helped by an Indigenous officer. But forgive me, I think it's broader than that.
Well, the lawyers are now saying they're going to take a class action. I wasn't aware of this, Paul. You'd know, but you need more than 7 claimants to make a class action. But their lawyer says that they have got more than 7. So I really look forward to seeing if this class action actually takes place. What do you think, Paul? Is it likely to? I
opened a mediation. My icebreaker the other day was there's more lawyers here than Erin Brockovich because they had 4 lawyers and a barrister and just little old me up against them. But yeah, that's my understanding. And also we'll discuss possible legal action in the NRL against a coach for comments he made in yesterday's game. So, yeah, that's my understanding.
It's pretty unlikely that there's going to be...
Yeah, it would be unlikely, I would say. And the loss is, of course, hard to quantify. Mental disintegration. It was, I think it has to stop. The fact that they've still got on their website, I didn't know that, Coutta, that astounds me. And any apology from that entity would obviously be half-hearted, if any.
Well, yeah, surely any legal action would have to take into account the SA WorkCover investigation, because that would be a discoverable document. It'd be interesting to see exactly what that report says, Judge, because clearly they don't have it would appear they don't have the full information.
Well, I would have thought, obviously, I mean, it's disgraceful and I would have thought illegal. At the very least, when you speak to a psychologist, you think you're speaking in confidence, and to have that thrown back at you in a so-called camp, it's beyond belief almost. Quite interesting, Samantha Walker, psychologist, said, this is interesting because I don't know about you, Professor, I've been in a couple of these camps. So the idea is to take you out of your comfort zone, but not to put you in your terror zone. And that was really interesting because there is...
Is there one for magistrates, is there?
But because it's okay to go...
Put you in a room with all these fancy books.
But that's what they were doing, put him into the terror zone. So this collective minds, if that's their business model, I'm not sure they'll get much more business, Coutta.
Well, I've got an actual phobia of singing, and there's a rumour doing the rounds that I will be forced up on stage to sing at this retreat. There's 150 people here. I won't be singing, but that's not my terror zone. It's very different to being sledged about your upbringing.
Paul, you said retreat. I thought that was Altona in the background.
No, this is Daydream Island. I've only been at the firm a month, so thank you for the find people at Blue Rock for snorkeling this afternoon, and but I've always find time for Sportsfan Radio.
Tell you what, we'll get you out on location, mate.
There you go. That's not our turn.
Oh yeah. So good old Bruce McFarlane. Professor, the Melbourne Football Club had a camp, and at that particular camp, that was when they had bricks in the backpacks, and some of the Dom Tyson hurt his knee. I think Salem cut his head or something, and I don't know if that was run by the same people, but the players actually took it up with the club, and they stopped the camp. And Melbourne players at the time were accused of being soft, not willing to go above and beyond. Now, it's the fact that the Melbourne Football Club listened to the players, the significant difference here for starters. Secondly, who the hell would sign off on something like this? And the
camps aren't voluntary, as I'm aware, and I think some of them they're misled into what exactly is taking place. So I think if you're warned that you're going to be harassed by SAS soldiers and paratroopers, you probably wouldn't be rushing to willingly go along. So there's a large part of deception in all this. But in terms of how much you're entitled to know what's in store for you is another question.
Paul, the other thing is that supposedly, and I think it was Josh Jenkins, talked about the fact that they were told they'd signed a
waiver.
That they couldn't actually a non-disclosure, so they actually couldn't talk about it. Like, who does that? And how does that happen?
Well, I'm interested too, in terms of the psychologist or whoever it was that Eddie Betts confessed that his dad wasn't around much. Was he verbally or told in writing that won't be used against you? But it doesn't really matter. It was just the assurance given, and it's just, as I said, disgusting that you can have your mental degradation, but it's normally more from the physical elements at these camps, not psychological about your upbringing. I've never heard of it before.
And that waiver, by the way, Paul, signed by the club on behalf of all the players. So the players had no buy-in to it. But the whole thing
is it similar to the Essendon peptide documentation?
Professor, it just made me think, just a side issue. Remember the Collingwood do better report? Well, that's now 18 months ago. Remember they appointed the 12-person panel? Well, they're supposed to be reporting now. I haven't heard a thing since, other than Heretia Lumumba went feral on them in May of this year and said nothing's happened and the whole thing's been dropped. I'm sensing a pattern here of when a racial issue comes up, they wallpaper over it and nothing to see here and let's move on.
Well, that's clearly what's happened with this camp, John, because we're talking about something that happened in 2018, in 2022, and the amount of press that it's brought and also the comments from past players there at the time clearly shows that it was just papered over, because otherwise there wouldn't be the outpouring of irritation, anger, angst, whatever you like, now, because it all would have been settled back then, but it wasn't.
Yeah. The other thing that raises to me too, Paul, is my old favourite, the Indigenous round, the Pride round, Anzac round. I mean, you guys, Manly, got caught up with this pretty recently with the Pride round.
Rainbow round, yeah.
What do they call it?
The Rainbow round. Yeah.
The Rainbow round. Is it time for these rounds to be put away?
Oh, I think that there's some great merit in them, particularly the Indigenous round. I think it's done well, but it needs to be the issue with that Manly issue is the players weren't consulted in advance. Doesn't matter what the issue is. That was their gripe. So it has to be done better, but I still think it has to be done.
Paul, there's only been one gay guy who played rugby league, isn't there?
Well, there's only one has come out, Ian Roberts.
So what does that tell you about the league? Either it's extraordinary that gay people don't play rugby league, which nobody believes, or that they just don't feel they can come out. I've got to say, I'm not sure if there's any AFL player, not that I care, nobody cares, but no AFL player feels I don't know, safe enough to be
Well,
able to
poor
come
Gary
back
Jack
and play.
once referred to Ian Robertson in a not complimentary term, and he had his face rearranged. So that Gary Jack probably regrets his statements back then, but that was a long time ago. Ian Roberts was a very tough player, but he's obviously dismayed by his former club's actions in this regard. You've seen what it's done to Manly. It effectively ended their season. So there's a chasm in that team now, which Schooner, Professor, should be a bit upset about, because it's not about the issue. It's that there was something allowed to divide the team, and it's ended their season effectively.
Paul, as I understand it, 55% of NRL players are either Indigenous or Islander. Now, if that's the case, that's the end of the Pride round, isn't it?
Oh, I don't think all have the same strictest beliefs. I think it was more just they were not consulted. So they have already stated, those players, that they'll run out proudly. Oh, I don't know, proudly might be overstating it, but for Rainbow Round next year. Okay.
So it was just the non-consultation that they're worried about, not so much the issue itself.
Yes, and I'm surprised we didn't hear from our favourite Israel Affolau, but he was fairly quiet on the issue. Maybe he's under some sort of agreement as well. I thought he might have let his views known with a biblical quote or something.
Yeah, just on that point, Paul, I just thought it was interesting that it seemed to be the way Manly approached it, because the Indigenous or Islander players in the other teams never seemed to have a problem.
No, it's more the jersey, and it was more that they felt they were being forced into representing something they might not necessarily believe in, no matter what it was. Putting to one side, there's a gambling sponsor on the front. I don't know where the Bible is on that. And also some of the other issues. You'd be standing down a lot in the rugby league game if you wanted to take a moral stand. You wouldn't be playing much. If every time someone did something in breach of the Bible, you'd be on the pine the whole time. Like Wendell Sailor's nickname, China, expensive and sits on the bench. They'd all be doing it.
Very good.
All right. Well, that's probably a good segue to round 21 in rugby league, Paul. And it started on Thursday night with the Roosters, I would say surprisingly, really serving it up to the Broncos. The Broncos have been in terrific form, but the Roosters managed to win by 18 points.
Forgive me, I'm right near the jet ski tour leaving here. So do you want me to jump on one of those? That'd be a first for the show, wouldn't it? Doing the segment from a jet ski. But no, that was quite surprising. The Roosters are certainly firming in the market to win it all. They always have the talent there, the Roosters, and they're looking quite good, and they've really recovered from some injuries. I think it showed up Brisbane as pretenders, as good as Adam Reynolds has been. They were a basket case not long ago, the Broncos, so they're good now, but I think they were really shown up by the Roosters, and that has not surprisingly been shown in the betting odds for the Broncos, which have ballooned out like me if I was on this retreat for a month. It was a tough loss for the Broncos. We also, Professor, saw some teams' seasons ended. The Raiders gone, the Dragons are gone, and Manly are gone as well. So I do need to raise one of the most astounding press conferences ever seen in rugby league. Ricky Stewart, who makes Craig Bellamy look like the Dalai Lama at times, he absolutely lost the plot at a player who he's got history with 15 years back, because his son played with poor old Jamin Salmon. Now, I'd never heard that Jamin Salmon is a dirty player. He kicked a player in the nether regions, if we put it that way. Ricky Stewart perceived it to be intentional, and he said he is a weak, gutted dog of a person, I quote. I knew him as a kid, and he stayed the same today. Now, he's been given the chance to back down on that, even with legal action possibly pending from Jamin Salmon, and he's refusing to back down. And you will not find someone who supports anything he says. The closest is Cooper Cronk, probably the most circumspect, saying Ricky Stewart's a legend of the game, 400 games, Jamin Salmon's just new. But Cooper Cronk was not justifying Ricky Stewart's. I've never heard a player described like that by a coach, a weak, gutted dog of a person, verbatim. So everyone's astounded. And Ricky Stewart, his team exited the finals, so he obviously wanted to let out a bit of steam. But that's a whole lot of steam right there, Professor. It's unbelievable conduct.
Yeah, I watched the press conference in total, Paul, and that happens right at the very end. He seemed like a bloke who had something he wanted to say, because If you're sitting there biting your lip, and he did that continually for about 6 minutes, I think he was just waiting to have his say, and he left it till the end. But
he's not known for biting his lip, Ricky Stewart. He'd be if you're looking like a heavyweight boxer, he'd be bleeding that much because he regularly speaks his mind, which you do like from coaches. You'd rather that than them just saying it was good to get the win, that sort of crap. It is good to have someone speak their mind, but that's taking it to a new level. It doesn't matter what happened on the field. You don't attack someone's character like that. It's astounding.
Now, you talked about teams having their seasons finished. I got a text from Schooner on Friday night, and I think I forwarded it on to you, and that was right. The Sea Eagles ran into the iceberg called the Eels, and I think that might be the end for them.
Well, they're very up and down, the Eels, but they turned it on, and I think there's a chasm there at Manly, as I said, all caused by that loss, and that is a divide in the playing group which won't easily be solved. Manly had the same issues probably 10 years ago, that there was half the team wanted to get as much money as they could. The other half wanted to take pay cuts to keep some veterans at the club. That caused a real divide. And it is a shame for Manly because they were just starting to look good and get it all together. When Des Hasler made the apology for the Rainbow Round, you could see that he was absolutely devastated because he's put so much into this season and it was out of his hands. And it's not his personal comment on what happened. It's simply that all that hard work, and if you're not passionate, you shouldn't be a coach. He was just demoralised and devastated, as he should be, because the season ended with that Rainbow Round for Manly.
Well, we always talk about coaches' pressure, which I generally think is unfair. But is Hasler now under that kind of pressure, given the sort of season they would have expected at the start of the year?
Well, I tipped them to win it all. So I think he's had a few issues conspiring against him. He certainly didn't. You can't put any blame for him on the Rainbow Round. But I think he'd be safe. But Manly just didn't deliver. I think I got 7 out of the 8 right, Professor. But Manly was the one I got wrong, very wrong. I tipped them to win it all. They're not going to make the finals. But I did notice, Professor, your Bulldogs are still there at about the same odds of Clive Palmer becoming the next Prime Minister, 1,000 to 1. So there must be the proverbial mathematical chance of your Dogs making it, Professor. Or is it just there as a bit of a joke?
I think it's there as a bit of a joke, Paul. Yeah. The Storm got back on the winners list on Friday night. Cameron Munster carrying the Storm with a hat-trick. But they were only playing the Titans. They've got a hard road between here and the end of the season, Paul.
Name dropping, I had a chat to the Titans captain. He was on the same plane as me leaving Melbourne. And it was amazing to see the Titans players and the Swans players who were also at the airport, the difference in physique. Carmichael Hunt, when he went to play for the Suns, dropped 8 kilos of muscle. And that just shows, I think, the different type physique of the players. But they were big boys, the Titans, but they were pretty down. And I did say to the captain, it'd be great to have a good team on the Gold Coast. Didn't sound great. They about my height, but about 20 kilos heavier. So I said, I know what I mean is I want to see you guys winning games. Because it sounded like I was saying you're not a good team, which they're not. But he's a big boy. And it would be good for everyone if the Gold Coast Titans were more successful than they are. I think that's a coach, Judge, who's under pressure at the Titans because there's a lot of money pumped into that club. There's a lot of players. He went with the most inexperienced spine, as we always talk about in the comp, and it's failed spectacularly. So they've got some veterans coming next year. Kieran Foran from Manly's going there, so that'll be good for them. We'll see what happens there at the Titans, but watch this space for them. Disappointing.
Now, Paul, an interesting way of Craig Bellamy dealing with Brandon Smith. If you can believe the reports, Brandon Smith was put in the naughty corner for 3 weeks, 3 whole weeks, not training with the team. I think that's a way of a coach showing your displeasure with a player.
Well, that all started when he decided to sign with the Roosters and was talking about winning a premiership for another team while he's still playing for the Storm. So I don't know Craig Bellamy personally, but I do know that would have seriously annoyed him as it would most coaches when you have a player on staff talking about winning trophies for another club, premierships. I don't think he's been out of the naughty corner since that happened, Professor. It's a shame, but he's clearly got his mind on the next club, which would annoy me too if I was coaching him.
Your Rabbitohs back with a big win last night, 8 tries to 2. The Warriors were never in it. What were your thoughts?
Giving it to Melbourne firm. I watched it with all the rugby league fans at the conference, which was about 1, which is me. But I watched the end of the game and enjoyed it. And it was a very good win, but the Warriors were very poor. But it's certainly an impressive outing by the Rabbitohs, who's starting to gel, and I think the coach deserves a lot of credit coming in after Wayne Bennett and losing Adam Reynolds, of course. I think there's some non-believers starting to turn around. So particularly with some of the injuries, Nathan Cleary, Panthers still, though, at $2 to win it all, which surprises me a touch. I think it's a bit more open than that, but who's going to beat them?
Can they sneak into the top four?
Unlikely, I think. The top four will be the Panthers, Melbourne, North Queensland and Cronulla. I'm pretty certain on that. Parramatta may sneak in, but I think it'll be Parramatta, South, the Roosters and Brisbane to round out the top 8.
And the other game last night, Sharks, too good for the Dragons. Nico Hines continues to show why the Sharks wanted him so much, and I continue to ask how Storm let him go.
Yeah, well, he just wasn't promised the full-time role. He didn't want to be the X Factor anymore. He wanted to be a regular starter and the captain of the ship, and he was given the chance to do that at the Sharks. Our long-time listener, Kevin Yapps, conceded defeat on our bet as to who'd finish higher, the Dragons or the Sharks. So the Sharks, I don't think quite have the capacity to win the comp, but they've played a very good season, and they're a really good team to watch.
So 2 games this afternoon. The first game, my Bulldogs playing the Cowboys. The Bulldogs have improved over recent weeks. They might serve it up to the Cowboys for a while, Paul.
Yeah, they've really stepped it up. They've been unleashed, it seems. They're playing, sounds a bit simplistic, but they've been saying the players were finally allowed to play footy. I don't know what they were doing before, but they've been able to play to their skills as opposed to the structured game plans that Trent Barrett tried to impose. So you're seeing a lot more ad-lib football, and they are really a good team to watch, Professor. Did we think we'd be saying that a couple of months ago?
No, we didn't. Have they got any chance of winning this afternoon?
They've got a chance, but I would love them to win. North Queensland rebuilding. They're a big chance rebuilding from some recent losses, but they're a big chance of winning it all. So I think North Queensland will win, but I'm hopeful for your Dogs. I think 22-16 for the Cowboys, but I've got you in the smoky category. There's only pride at stake for the Dogs, unless you've taken 1,000 to 1 on them winning the comp. But it's. I think they're playing some good footy and building well for next year.
Okay, and 2 of the most disappointing teams this season, the Wests Tigers and Newcastle Knights, and the Knights having a problem with David Clemmer during the week. I would imagine he's probably finished at the Knights.
Yeah, I think there's some real issues there, and it won't be a game that I'll be using to try and convert some of these people at this retreat to rugby league, because I don't think the standard will be too high. They might see worse defence than Ivan Milat, I think, this afternoon. And
your thoughts on a final score?
It could be, I think, Tigers 36, Knights 20. It's going to be a high-scoring one. It'll be errors galore.
And before we get off rugby league, Paul, Thursday night, before we're on air again, the Panthers playing the Storm at Penrith. What are your thoughts on that game?
I just think the Panthers will be too strong at home, but the Storm, you can never write them off. It'll be a massive game. They'll be up for it. But I think the Panthers at home, but it'll be a great game to watch. The Storm just have a few injuries, though. They've lost their regular number 7. They would love Nico Hines there on the bench, I can tell you, but he unfortunately can't keep a Ferrari in the garage for too long. The Storm's depth has been tested more than I've seen since their inception.
All right, last question on rugby league. The Raiders and the Seagulls are just outside the 8. Any chance of them squeezing in before the finals?
No, it's simply because the teams above them, I think, are too good and they've got too much class. It's not like there's a team sitting in the 8 that's not capable of winning it all. So I just can't see them getting there, because I can't see them getting above. Who are they going to knock out? Possibly the Broncos. It depended if there's injury to Adam Reynolds. I hate wishing injury on anyone, but that's the only chance I think of Brisbane. I mean, the bookie's $29, Brisbane to win it all. The next is the Raiders, $126. So that's perhaps why Ricky Stewart lost the plot. But again, that'll be worth watching this week, what happens, whether he does retract his statements, whether there is legal action, and whether the NRL takes action for possibly bringing the game into disrepute, possibly.
Okay, thanks for that roundup, Paul. A question to both of you without notice. Commonwealth Games. Judge, have you been watching any of the Commonwealth Games?
Not as much as I probably should, Professor. I've always called them disparaging of the glorified school sports. Bit nasty, but I don't get all that enthralled by it all. I have been following, though, my new favourite country of NIEU, NIEU, population of 1,600 people. They won a bronze medal. And just going by the, just working out comparative, we always talk about Australia punches above its weight. This country, it was compared to Australia, 20,000 medals by now. So I think well done to NIU. And there's a couple of other countries there that are just punching above their weight. So it's
can I ask you a question a further question without notice, Judge? Where is NIU?
South Pacific Island, apparently. Here we go. I thought you'd ask. Is NIU a poor country?
Maybe they could have ScoMo in charge of their tourism. Where the bloody hell are you? He could come up with that for NIU.
But look, good luck to them. They're 1,600 people, and they've got a bronze medal. I mean, a town like Wangaratta should have 15 bronze medals just from Wangaratta itself on those figures. It's fantastic.
There's a guy in my team here from Wagga Wagga. The town's so good they named it twice, but that per capita has produced the most champions in Australian sport, I think, of any town in Australia.
I think that's right. And it's also great to see Nauru also pulling in medals, Professor. So and my favourite country, Ghana, has got a couple. So that's great to see. But look, I have
got more favourites in that Cadbury's box.
What's that?
You've got more favourites in that Cadbury's box. You've just named 3 favourites.
No, it's good. It's good to see them doing well. But I don't know, what you guys been following it? That doesn't do much for me.
I watched a little bit of it, John, but isn't it becoming, I don't know, isn't it becoming futile for other countries? I just looked at the medal tallies board. Australia and the United Kingdom, or Britain, have won 300 medals between them.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be 300 medals left between the rest of the Commonwealth. Now, it just seems ridiculous and Canada have won 80 medals. So You've got those 3 powers, and then everybody else has got a little sprinkling, including you. Why do countries go and compete if there's absolutely no chance of winning?
Well, there is. If you're from the NIU, and it's only 1,600, I don't know if they've got I don't know what they've got in. I never know the medals for.
A bit harsh, professors, like me in my dating days. You've got to try.
Yeah, that's right. And I
got to roll the dice.
The NIU news would be all over it. They think this is the best thing that's happened to NIU, or in fact Nauru, ever. Ever since the birds stopped crapping over the place in Nauru. So it's I think for them it's fantastic.
I've got to go, gents. Sorry,
it doesn't mean much.
There's a boat coming up behind me. I've got to go.
Right, mate.
Well, I was just going to say, Judge, are we really going to watch, or do we really want to watch Australia beat up the rest of the Commonwealth? Is that TV? Is that what TV is all about? That's what we're going to watch.
Well, I suppose we've got to get the ratings, Professor. That's the all-powerful thing. We'll find if the ratings say that it's been worthwhile. But it leaves me a bit cold to see Australia's beating up NIU and Nauru and Ghana and all my other favourites.
Judge, we've got a COVID truncated show today.
Yeah, get better, Professor.
Well, we'll try. Gelding's tips for what they're worth.
Yep.
Sandown, it's hurdle and jumps day at Sandown, and he's gone in the Grand National Hurdle race 5, horse 1, Saunter Boy, and in race 8, horse 4, Michigan. And he's also got some picks at Swan Hill, race 7, horse 7, Night of Delight. That's probably one for the ladies from the tennis club. And race 8, horse 12, Mally Hammer.
Good betting and gamble responsibly, Professor, we always say.
Well, that's right. Although I did see Peter Costello coming out. Oh, no, not Tim Costello coming out and discussing the gambling noted on the Manly jumper wasn't raising as much furore as the rainbow colours.
Right.
And Paul already mentioned that. So All right. Thanks, Judge, for being with us today.
Good on, Professor. The Zinger count was down to 7 today, but a late start from Paul today, but he came back well.
Well, we'll look forward to a full version of the show next Sunday, although you